This is Joseph Campanella. Bishop Sheen's spoken and written words are a treasure for God's people of all religions. The diversity of his words reflect his certainty that it is not a unity of religion that we plead for, but a unity of religious people.
One of the most important things when you're sailing is wind direction. You always have to know where the wind is coming from.
In the last couple of installments on this playlist, we discussed that before the Second Vatican Council, Archbishop Fulton Sheen was an eloquent defender of the Catholic faith. But when the winds changed with the Second Vatican Council, he changed direction along with the rest of the Novus Ordo Church. In the last installment, we looked at Bishop Sheen's activities in 1967. Today we'll look at 1968, his second full year as Bishop of the Rochester Diocese. Let's start by taking a look at this article that appeared on February 8th in the Democrat and Chronicle. It reported on Bishop Sheen's proposal for the creation of interfaith schools. Bishop Sheen was quoted as saying, "In God's name, let's get together for the education of Christian youth." Here's a photo from a few days later. Bishop Sheen was chatting with a Protestant minister at an ecumenical service. The service marked the first time Protestant and Jewish clergy were invited to participate in a procession in Sacred Heart Cathedral. A few days later, Bishop Sheen addressed Jews, marking the first time a Catholic prelate had ever addressed Jewish worshippers from a Jewish pulpit on the Hebrew Sabbath in the Archdiocese of New York. Again, this violated the Code of Canon Law of 1917. On February 20th, Bishop Sheen's Rochester Diocese announced that it was introducing a pilot project of sex education in its Catholic schools. At the end of February, Sheen finally encountered backlash due to the issue with St. Bridget's Church. And this was a turning point with his tenure in Rochester. From that time, people in his diocese increasingly voiced their anger and frustration with Bishop Sheen. The Democrat and Chronicle reported that the St. Bridget's episode brought to light a discontent with the bishop's policies that apparently had been smoldering among the local clergy since he arrived in Rochester. The St. Bridget's saga is so interesting and so convoluted that I'm going to devote an entire video on it next week, but for now, let's move on to March of 1968. What kind of churches were being built in Rochester during that time? Here's a photo of Bishop Sheen dedicating the new Church of the Annunciation. According to the caption, the pulpit was next to the modern freeform altar. And here's a photo of the exterior of the church. On March 31st, the Democrat and Chronicle announced that the dissident theologian Hans Küng was conferring with Bishop Sheen. Küng is now elderly, but he's still alive, and he's known for having served as an expert theologian advisor to the members of the Second Vatican Council, publicly rejecting the doctrine of papal infallibility, criticizing the lifting of the excommunications to the bishops of the Society of St. Pius X, and he's also known for his support of euthanasia. In April, the Diocese of Rochester announced the closing of Most Precious Blood School. About 200 people met and hurled charges of dictatorship and callousness toward the superintendent of schools and to Bishop Sheen. Marchers determined to picket Bishop Sheen's residence at 50 Chestnut Street. Interestingly, Bishop Sheen resided in an apartment at 50 Chestnut Street rather than residing with other priests in housing owned by the diocese. Another demonstration followed, and that one involved 500 protesters. Some carried signs asking Bishop Sheen to reconsider the decision to close the school. One sign said, "Bishop Sheen, listen to us." On April 17th, Bishop Sheen spoke of Simon Cyrene and was quoted as saying, "I think he was the first one who shared the cross of Christ. This may be the summons of Christ from heaven today. He's asked them, meaning African Americans, to share his cross." Bishop Sheen added that in the future, the intellectual power of whites will be transformed to other colors. Here Bishop Sheen displayed the smug, condescending, and patronizing racism that is so typical of liberals. He suggested that intelligence resided with the white race, but the white people would share their intellectual abilities with people of other races to help transform those races. In early May, Bishop Sheen participated in still another ecumenical service at a Presbyterian church. On May 27th, Bishop Sheen dedicated a new Catholic church in his diocese called St. Januarius. The pastor said that St. Januarius had two motifs, the grape country and the mountainous surroundings. The walls were made of poured concrete inlaid with thick glass of varied colors, representing the various types of grapes grown in the Naples area. Here's a photo of the interior of the church. Here's another one. Finally, here's the exterior. Now this is truly an ugly church. In June, after the assassination of Robert Kennedy, Sheen knelt beside the coffin of Kennedy to pray for him. And then Sheen changed his mind. He doesn't need it, Bishop Sheen declared. He's in glory. How many people decided not to pray for the soul of Kennedy based upon the assurances of Sheen that Kennedy was already in heaven and didn't need any prayers? There are a lot of adjectives that I could use to describe what Bishop Sheen did here, but I think that since it's so self-evident, I'll leave it unsaid. In July, Bishop Sheen issued a moratorium on the construction of expensive churches. Sheen said, "The right of the poor to have a decent home enjoys priority over our right to erect tax-exempt structures which exceed the bare minimum." Catholics have always believed in the appropriateness and the virtuousness of spending money and resources to give glory to God, and they do that in the construction of magnificent churches. On the other hand, Bishop Sheen's words seem to echo those of Judas in the Gospel of St. John. Mary therefore took a pound of ointment of the right spikenard, of great price, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Then one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, he who was about to betray him, said, "Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor?" Jesus therefore said, "Let her alone, that she may keep it against the day of my burial. For the poor you will always have with you, but me you will have not always." This theme is also related to the saga of St. Bridget's, which we'll discuss next week. Here's an interesting question and answer from the September 8th issue of the Democrat and Chronicle. Question: I recently heard that Bishop Sheen's real name is not Fulton. What is it, and how did the mix-up arise? Answer: this gets a bit complicated. The bishop was born on May 8, 1895 in El Paso, Illinois, and was baptized as Peter. At his confirmation, he took the name of John. The Fulton was adopted later. The story goes that his maternal grandfather took him to school one day, and when the nun asked him his name, the grandfather replied, "Fulton," his mother's maiden name. The name stuck, and now he signs his name as Fulton J. Sheen. Here's a November photo of Bishop Sheen with Ted Kennedy. Bishop Sheen was named as a member of the Kennedy Family Foundation Board of Trustees. So next week, we'll take a look at the saga of Bishop Sheen and St. Bridget's Church. But in the meantime, please pray for the church.
Got the Fulton blues. Well, I've been to the bottom and to the top of the hill. Well, I've been to the bottom and the top of the